Before we begin, I'm going to do something that I normally do not do and go through multiple shoutouts at once. I don't normally do this, but I had a lot of people who upgraded their tier to the $5 when I started posting the TJTV archives to my Patreon. So I want to give them some credit for supporting me more, but it's not something I normally do. So I'm just going to rifle through the ones who did that for me. So thank you very much to T Ranger, John G, Kevin W, Maestro B, Alan W, Milo the Mighty, and I believe Mellow Boy. I believe that covers everybody. But thank you all for upgrading your memberships. And I hope you enjoy the archives of TJTV. Remember, after the first of the month, we're going to do 3 more that are going to go live for all those who want to see the old videos. So hope you enjoy when those go up. All right. So today, I don't know why I'm in a Mirage mood, but I'm kind of in a Mirage mood. So I thought this is one of those names that Hasbro's tried very hard to keep active, because Mirage can be a easy name to fall out of trademark. You have to remember, the way legal trademarking works is weird. You have to keep using the name in order to actually retain the rights to the name. But if the name is used in too many things too much, then it can be described as a generic term and thus become untrademarkable. Meaning, if they get the trademark, they have to keep using it or risk losing it for good. And Mirage is kind of one of those. So they have been keeping it in active use, mostly on F1 cars over the years. Odds are, if you're an F1 car and you're going to be a Transformer, you're going to be Mirage. It's just how it is. Because apparently we don't want anyone named Dragstrip unless we have to. So, let us go through the history of Mirages in Transformers. That obviously starts with the original G1. So, this one's interesting. In more than meets the eye, he is set up very differently than how you would expect if you had actually read the series Bible. Obviously, back then you couldn't, now we can. We know his original characterization was as a Cybertronian elitist who took up arms against the Decepticons, but would rather be hunting turbo foxes back with his friends. Well, apparently, someone in the mix didn't like the whole, Mirage the Game Hunter shtick. So they just kind of just made him pine for Cybertron. He was the most homesick of everybody in the original 3 episodes. And he gets to be the hero at the end who stops Megatron, giving up a chance to go back to Cybertron. But, okay, great hero moment. That should set you up for being, the guy for the show. And unfortunately, Mirage kind of falls off after that. The need to keep promoting different characters to sell more toys just kind of meant he fell out of the loop even after such a strong start. So you'd see him in the mix. His invisibility powers would become very handy over the course of the original season 1. Powers that would one day become completely confused with the illusion abilities of Hound. So, good job taking Hound's thing away. His only big episode after that was where he was taken over by Bombshell, thanks to a Cerebro shell. And that led to the characterization that we have for Mirage going forward, which is he the traitor? Because that was the whole thing, was the whole episode was about Cliffjumper thinking Mirage was a traitor to the Autobots. And that's just kind of something that followed him, even into IDW 1.0, Spotlight Mirage, really focused on the idea that he really was a Decepticon sleeper agent. He just wasn't aware of it himself yet. And over the years, there's been a lot of depictions of Mirage in G1 fictions that kind of paint him the same way. It just kind of became his thing, to be like that fringe Autobot. There's a few iterations that we aren't entirely sure if they are new versions or just rehashes of the old character. So I'm just going to hit a couple of them, okay? So we have G2 Mirage, who is obviously still an IndyCar, but very, very different design, different color scheme, looks more like a wasp than anything. This one is actually a different character depending on the fiction you watch, because this is one of Geoxis's clones in some fictions, meaning that yes, this is a different Mirage character-wise. The other questionable one would be Machine Wars, which carries Mirage's familiar colors, though very subdued and like washed out. But otherwise, yeah, it's like it hits familiar Mirage notes, but it also doesn't. You know, the head's new, the numbering is incorrect. You know, it just feels off. So again, not particularly one we know was in use. Not one we particularly know is like the original iteration, rather. To keep the trademark in use, they had to do it in Machine Wars, apparently, because, I don't know, you couldn't come up with anything in Beast Wars to use Mirage on. Chameleon is right there. And we could have had color change plastic in the 90s. Man, look how cool would that have been. But no, we have to wait until Beast Machines before we get a new Mirage, and that ends up being the Viacon version. His packaging markets him as an idiot, but a prankster, whether that is against Maximals or fellow Viacons. Apparently, his intelligence is to bridge the gap of intelligence between drone and general. He's still an idiot. It's always been a really cool looking Mirage. Like, the design of the toy, I always thought was really, really cool. Maybe the head's a little big for the body, but it's a really cool vehicle mode. I don't know why Megatron decided, I don't know, F1 car, Formula 1 racer. I dug into Earth's history, and I really like that car design. So we're going to make a Viacon minion out of it. Still, neat look. Like this one. Mirage would be a lot more familiar when it came to 2001 and car robots / robots in disguise. This one obviously keeps a lot of the familiar colors, the same color scheme, even though it is obviously a very different character, being a spy changer. This one, funny enough, also has a story dedicated to him. An episode that is literally, is Mirage a traitor or not? As he pretends to help the Predacons in order to get in good with their scheme and sabotage it from within. So it's like the one big spy changer episode in Robots in Disguise. There's not a whole lot of like story focus on the spy changers. So you don't get a whole lot of characterization behind them, but for whatever reason, Mirage got a similar story to his original G1 iteration, which is fascinating to me. But that wasn't the only one in RID, was it? We also got Mirage GT, the repaint of the Beast Machines toy. This is, again, I think, a really cool color scheme on what is, I think, a very underrated toy. I like this one a lot as well. Now, fictionally, at the time, all we had were like the bios on the back of the box, which didn't really give us much indication of who these like Viacon repaints turned Autobots were. So you just had to kind of imagine it in your head. As far as we knew, Mirage GT was just a different iteration of Mirage. And for whatever reason, Hasbro was so stuck on Mirage being the Indy car that they couldn't just come up with a new name. They had to name him Mirage something, even though there was a Mirage in the cartoon at the time that was a completely different character. Then you get to Ask Vector Prime later on. So, Ask Vector Prime actually acknowledged that the second Mirage in this universe, and there's a very long-winded explanation about like the original Spy Changer Mirage, a plot by Megatron, time travel, using a spark to inhabit a Viacon. It gets very convoluted. Ask Vector Prime is not where you go for a cohesive, easy-to-understand narrative, but it is where you go to figure out pretty much every connection between every Transformers universe. So yeah, technically this is the same as the Mirage we just saw, but technically it's also not. It's a very gray area. How about another yellow Mirage? How about that? And this one is unquestionably a different character because it's a Minicon from Armada. This one gave us a lot of debate back in the day. This is 1/3 of the Skyboom shield, but also It is the second IndyCar. I know I'm interchanging IndyCar and F1 car for the racing purists in the comments section who are about to throw pitchforks at me. It's just whichever term my brain comes up with at the time. I know they're different vehicles. Do not attack me. You get what I mean, though. You know, it's the style of the race car. And in this case, we had this funny thing where Armada Starscream already came with a Swindle that was also an IndyCar, and the transformation was the same. So for the first time, I think, we had the debate of what is a retool and what is a brand new toy using the same engineering. You know, it's a conversation that heated up the year after when Energon Starscream became a thing. But it's the first time where we kind of like noticed it. Like, huh. It's the same toy, but it's not. How? What? How? So it made for an interesting discussion point, but also silly fights and arguments over dumb things that don't matter. So, next year, we got a new Mirage. And new Mirage, very different. Very, very different. See, it's funny. It's funny. So, like, Energon had a character named Wheeljack in Japan, in Superlink, but they named him Downshift in America because they had already used the name Wheeljack in the previous series. But we just used Mirage in the previous series, but we're going to use Mirage for a completely different character now. I guess it doesn't matter when it's a mini-con. But no, this is the upgraded tidal wave, so he carries over the characterization, the somewhat dumb but obscenely powerful robot, though in a far smaller form, and a very, very cool look. Now, toy-wise, I was never as impressed by this toy as everyone else was, but I've learned to appreciate the fact that it was a speedboat in an era where aquatic transformers were actually, you know, actually kind of respected. As opposed to today, where we literally have to beg and plead with Hasbro to just make a transformer that's designed to be in water. Still, super cool look, though. I cannot take anything away from the look, which apparently was based on a custom Gundam that Aaron Archer saw one day. Funny. So, the next Mirage to talk about. No, I didn't double up that slide. No, there is another Mirage in Energon that is just the same Mirage. Here's the fun part. So Hasbro and Takara weren't really communicating very well when it came to like what these characters were. A lot of characters in Energon were designed by Hasbro to be completely new characters, like Roadblock, for instance. But Takara was deciding to introduce these new characters as upgrades of previous characters, meaning that by the time Hasbro had already settled on a Mirage and things had gone to print and all of this, that's when they found out that Takara was just going to keep the characters and just upgrade their designs. So, toy-wise, in the toy packaging, and I believe even in the Energon comic books, as short-lived as they were, I believe this particular version of Mirage exists that is never attached to Tidal Wave at all, because that was the original intention. Thus, continuity-wise, there's this weird little divide between them. It's funny how it works. So, after this is where we get into the age of the homage, meaning that we have far more like G1 Mirages popping up, like in classics, for instance. And we start getting into different iterations of the character who are still technically from different universes and are different characters, like Mirage Bot, you know, from the Play School GoBots line. I believe this is repainted from one of the previous toys. I want to say Speedbot, but I can never keep those Play School GoBots straight. Because it's one of those areas of Transformers I don't dive into often. It's a cute little figure. Funny enough, for whatever reason, there's no picture of it on TF Wiki. Even though, like, it's a toy that actually came out, it's bizarre. Like, it's genuinely bizarre that, like, there's this weird gap on that website for this toy. But still, cute little ones. And then this is also the era where Shattered Glass was a thing. Shattered Glass Mirage is a character who uses invisibility to rob banks and stayed invisible most of the time. Forced to become partially visible, or translucent, by Optimus Prime so he could make use of his skills. Though his powers were inverted. He couldn't go fully invisible anymore. He could just become completely opaque, which is not helpful in any regard. But hey, that's how they chose to invert him. It's actually based on a Henkei repaint of Mirage that is translucent plastic, but black and white paint on top. It's a cool look. It's a cool looking figure. But then we get into this one, and you might be going like, no, that's Dino. That's Dino from Dark of the Moon. And I would go, close. Close, but not quite. So, turns out, Dino is not exactly the easiest thing to trademark. I'm going to blame the Flintstones on that one somewhere. I'm not sure where, but somewhere. So yeah, we don't actually have a toy line. We don't actually have Dino in the Dark of the Moon toy line. We have Mirage. Mirage has Dark of the Moon toys because that was the placeholder name in case they couldn't get Dino. Dino was what they could call him in the movie because they could call him anything. But as far as just securing a trademark on a toy, they had to go to a backup name, and the backup name happened to be Mirage. Which leads to this interesting situation. No, this is technically not Dark of the Moon Mirage. This actually came out in the Transformers Prime Cyberverse line, during Wave 2 specifically, as an aligned version of Mirage. So technically, a completely different version of the character, even though it is identically the same. It's weird, this one. So the packaging actually does not have the Prime part of the logo, just the Transformers part, even though the packaging is Transformers Prime. So that's kind of like an indication that it's like a leftover from the previous Cyberverse line that is just bleeding into the new one just so they can release the toy, which is just a Revenge of the Fallen sideways repaint, by the way, because along with the name being difficult, the vehicle was also difficult to secure a license for. But in European packaging, they retain the Transformers Prime logo on the box, meaning this is technically aligned Mirage. Super weird, right? Super weird. Now, fortunately, the movies continue on, and we eventually do get the movie Mirage. That is like unquestionably a new character, unquestionably his own thing, and probably the strongest starring role Mirage has ever had. It's fascinating that they chose to use him as the main character rather than Bumblebee, because he's had more than his fair share, but also of all the Autobots you could have picked from, you know, like Sideswipe's right there, you know, Blue Streak hasn't been in the movies, you know. Well, I guess, well, it's a different universe, so they could use Sideswipe. I just realized what I did there. Still, I do like movie Mirage. I did think he was a fun protagonist to have. I do like that movie overall better than, you know, several of the Bayverse movies. So, yeah, I'm a fan of this one. And this leads to, like, weird iteration ones, like the classic Heroes Team Mirage, who is maybe movie Mirage based, maybe G1 Mirage based. It's not really certain. It's interesting in that it's one of the few Mirages that is strictly just a normal car rather than any kind of like like race car or anything. Oh, speaking of, we have another weird incident here. So let's talk about let's get into modern ones, shall we? Because the video is already running long. So of course now we get into the modern ones. And this starts with Transformers 1 Mirage. Now, technically, he only exists as a toy because of a weird, like, last-minute change. So, if you think back to the Iacon 500 and the ending, the robot who crossed the finish line seemed to be Mirage. Based on the head design, it absolutely looks like Mirage, right? Well, it's not exactly how it was. So in the movie, it's announced as Chromia as the winner. But the funny thing here is that obviously the design does not look like Chromia at all. The scoreboards had Mirage's name on it far more than Chromia. throughout the race. A character who looks far more like Chromia appears in crowd shots, and behind the scenes info actually refers to said character as Chromia, meaning there was some last minute switch up to make Chromia the winner instead of Blur, or instead of Mirage. So you have this weird, like, I don't know. This is the Icon 500 3-pack of them, so I'm aware that this is, I believe, like a Cyberverse one-step changer Mirage. I can't remember where this came from. Maybe it's unique to the movie. I honestly, again, I didn't follow these that closely. Point being, it's the only way this Mirage technically exists. Even though in the movie he was supposed to actually have a pretty big scene, honestly. We can go into Earthspark Mirage, and this one seems to hold a little bit like the movie character in personality, where he's a little bit cheeky, you know, and this is one again where we're using illusions rather than turning invisible, but I guess that's just gonna be his thing now. The next and final Mirage we're gonna talk about that too. I do like this one overall. I think it's a decent little take on Mirage. Interestingly enough, he kind of has an opposite thing going on, where it's not like he's not the one who is possibly going to go to the villains. He's kind of the one-man rebellion against the villains on Cybertron, which is a fun little twist to his usual, like, more mysterious depiction. And that said, we also have our current Mirage, the one from Cyberworld. Now, here's a fascinating thing. He's a jet. So that's a first. First time we've seen him take to the air. I believe, like, and weirdly enough, it kind of works because he maintains a lot of his body shape thanks to an F1 car already kind of being designed to look like a jet. Because, funny thing, aerodynamics work the same whether it's on a track or in the air, roughly. So similar shapes tend to make things go fast against the wind. So it weirdly works. So we have, like, Faux Seeker Mirage. And not a bad depiction. This is, again, a little bit more interesting because he really doesn't take a side. You know, his toy in this shot here marks a Autobot, but he really has no loyalty. It's basically just whatever benefits him the most at the time. And it does make him a little bit more interesting. He's kind of like a rogue player in the series. So, yeah, interesting take. It takes that, like, original depiction of him, kind of switches it up a lot. I don't mind at all. So canonically, those are all of the different versions of Mirage out there, from the homages to the wildly different. But I am going to highlight one more because he does briefly appear in official material. There is an animated Mirage designed by Derek Wyatt. This guy appeared as a crowd filler in the Stunt-A-Con job. So never an animated appearance, never an episode focus or anything like that. But, you know, it's a really cool Mirage design from another universe, and I thought I got to include this somewhere. So I thought it'd be a good little ender for the video. But that's going to be it. That's every iteration of Mirage that I could remember, or in this case, that TF Wiki could remember. So let me know in the comments below what your favorite version of Mirage is. Shout out to anyone who picks one of the left field answers. And as always, thank you very much for watching. I will see you next time.
Hello everyone, I am Astral Agent Magnetar, a Tokusatsu VTuber, and I am streaming 4 times a week over on Twitch, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday afternoons, and a special late night one on late Friday/early Saturday. So come watch, come hang out, and let's make an impact together.